try. Before I get started, I want to commend Thomas and Xavier for their excellent example of leadership. We've got a couple talented young guys doing good jobs here for the church. All right, 7 good years, 7 bad years. May not be the most appropriate title. Generally, the theme of my talk is the importance of saving. The importance of having an emergency fund or rainy day fund, what we call, or another way of looking at it is living within one's means. And Thomas read from Genesis, the 41st chapter, verses 14 through 31. Go to the next slide now, Thomas. I go like this, that's what that means. Talking about Joseph, if we step back and look at Joseph, he was the apple of Jacob, his father's eye. Gave him an expensive robe, which we call a coat of many colors, and his brothers didn't like that. And they hated Joseph for that, so they plotted to get rid of him. They ended up putting him in a pit, and then they sold him to the Midianites, who turned around and sold him to Potiphar. And Joseph was through it all, was a hard worker, had a good attitude, and was committed to God. Remained faithful. Potiphar saw his good virtues and put him in charge of his affairs. In fact, Potiphar's wife liked him in charge of the affairs, and he wanted to have one with Joseph. And Joseph, being a godly man, knew that it's wrong to have relations with a married woman, so he fled. And Potiphar's wife fled to Potiphar and told a lie that Joseph was trying to make the moves, so he ended up in jail. Once again, in jail, Joseph remained positive, hardworking, and in verse 21, he showed favor in the eyes of the prison warden. While he was in prison, he met a baker and a cupbearer, or what we would know as a butler. And they had dreams, and he interpreted their dreams for them. One was good and one was bad. The cupbearer, he was able to go back and work for his boss, or the King Pharaoh. And as he was leaving jail, Joseph said, remember to put a good word in for me. Well, he got to do that. But 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream, and he couldn't understand what this dream meant. And he couldn't find anybody to tell him what it did. And the cupbearer remembered Joseph had interpreted his dream, so he told King Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sent for Joseph to interpret his dream. And go to the next slide. The dream was the 7 fat cows and the 7 ugly skinny cows, the 7 full heads of grain and the 7 lean heads of grain. And what did it mean? It meant that there would be 7 good years and 7 bad years. And in the 7 good years, they were to store or say to be prepared for the bad years. Okay, Don, what's this got to do with today? Well, we're in a recession. The GDP, the gross domestic product, is contracted by 9%. Our government has taken the Keynesian economic philosophy that they can spend their way into prosperity. And I'm not here to deny that or support it or deny it. The point is, we need to be prepared for the best case scenario and also the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is the economy does pick back up. We also have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. What if it doesn't pick up? What if we're in a recession for a long period of time? If we're in this recession for a long period of time, then we would end up in the Great Depression, similar to that. Our head of our Federal Reserve, Mr. Bernanke, is a scholar of the Depression. And one of the biggest mistakes our government made during the Depression was they restricted the money supply. So he's done everything he can to prevent that. They've flooded the market with a lot of money to help ease the economic turmoil that we're in. But there are a lot of similarities in the period we're going through as we did back in the 30s. Now, a lot of you young people may think that I grew up during the Depression, but I didn't. But I have parents and I had grandparents that did, and they told me several stories. And they weren't very pretty stories. And basically, a lot of people went hungry. And a lot of people without homes, and a lot of people without jobs. And if you get a chance, if you haven't watched the movie The Grapes of Wrath, and that'll give you an idea of what the Depression was all about. Some of the similarities to the Depression that we're going through right now is back in the late 20s, early 30s, there was a lot of speculation, and it was easy to borrow money and pay it on time. And what we've gone through here in recent years is the housing bubble. And we saw real estate appreciate at rates that were very unrealistic. Now, we didn't see it too much in this area because we didn't really participate in the recovery, but in areas like California, Arizona, Florida, and Nevada, real estate was going up at unprecedented rates, and a lot of people got sucked into that. And right now we got 1 million homes on the market for sale. It's the largest inventory this country's ever had. It's going to take several years for that to digest itself. In April, we had the largest number of foreclosures, people losing their houses, and that's going to take a while to digest that. 70% of the people that have a mortgage in Las Vegas right now, 7 out of 10 are in the red. They owe more on their house than what they could sell it for, even if they could sell it. That, too, is going to take several years to get through. Next slide. Also, we have unemployment. Unemployment right now is at 8.5%. And if you add in the number of people who've given up looking for jobs and whose unemployment insurance has run out, it's more like 15 to 16%. And that number is growing right now. It's not bottoming off or settling out. In Ohio, it's over 10%. And here in county, it's almost 20%. The stock market has taken a drop. It's recovered somewhat from its low in early March, but still it's down over 40 to 45% from what it was at its high. And when people's net worth goes down, they're less apt to go out and buy things. So people right now are very reluctant to spend money, particularly on major purchase items. Yesterday, I read that auto sales are at the worst drop they've taken in 30 years. It just gives you an indication that things are not good right now. Another concern is debt as individuals, but also our national debt. It's projected that our national debt will grow to $1.8 trillion by the end of this year. That's not millions, that's not billions, that's trillions. That's a lot of money, folks. And the path our government's taking, it is not infinity. It's eventually going to come a day when there's a breaking point there. They can only print and spend so much money. So that is another concern that we have to look at. And finally, we have the banks. The banks came out about a month ago and said that they're making money now, and that they passed the government stress test. But if you read the figures a little more closely, they just they did the shell game and they fudged the numbers. And the banks are not in great shape. The 19 largest banks controlling about 65% of the assets in this country are in a position that if this recession would last for a long period of time, the ability for them to stay solvent is in jeopardy. And the figures that the government used for the stress test, primarily on the unemployment and the, the unemployment and the interest rates were and the time frame was very small. They didn't take into consideration a prolonged recession, nor did they take into consideration the systemic risk involved in case one bank would go and another and another. So banks aren't out of the woods yet. So what does this bring us to? Thomas, if you turn to the next one, it's called wants and needs. In our country, we are a consumer-driven society. And we've developed this attitude that we got to have it now. And that's come back to haunt a lot of people. The average credit card debt in this country is $10,500. Now, some of you out there are probably saying, I don't have any debt. Well, if that's the case, then there's somebody out there that's got $21,000. There's someone that's got $30,000. I saw a story on MSNBC of a couple. It was a mortgage broker in California. And he said he had elderly couples or older couples that would come in every year to refinance their house, to get the equity out of their house, to pay off their credit cards. Well, real estate's not going up anymore. In fact, it's going down. So this is an example of people that have had to alter their lifestyles from what they were doing before. When we look at wants and needs,